Welcome to the Only Dream Big podcast, starring your host, Donnie Bedney. Only Dream Big is a podcast where Donnie will share tips and experiences on different topics, such as acquisition entrepreneurship, human capital, and the future of the workforce. He is the president of PSP Metrics and has been in the assessment and human capital management industry for more than 15 years, with the goal of driving change through people. As your guide on dreaming big, let's hear from the man himself.
And welcome back to another episode of the Only Dream Big podcast. I am your host, Donnie Bedney, and once again, excited for you all to hear from our next guest, Dr. Gary Williamson. Is an organizational psychologist, a colleague and good friend of mine, and just so excited to be able to learn from him and some of the gems that I'm excited about him sharing, with you all today. Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Donnie. It's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy our time together.
And so, Gary, I know in our pre-conversation about it, I was kind of sharing with you the vision of the Only Dream Big podcast and, being able to give people practical and pragmatic kind of nuggets, to either bring their own kind of personal / professional dreams to reality, or even as they think about kind of the vision for the organizations that they run, bringing that to fruition. And so can you start off, because I think this would be helpful, to folks, just kind of, talking through some of, your background a little bit, and maybe even starting, frankly, it could be, as far back as you want to, in your life. But, if you want to fast forward to, say the late 80s, early 90s, when you kind of moved into a position as an owner of an organization, and then, we're able to kind of take this vision, for this organization that you built over the next 30 years. You could start there, or, once again, go back a little bit farther if you want to.
Well, Donnie, I should tell you something that you already know that the listeners don't know, and that is I was not originally an organizational psychologist. My original training was in healthcare, and so I was a hospital psychologist for a number of years, and learned how to do organizational work while I was in the hospital, because I started to do some work with employees as well as with patients, and I liked that so much that I decided to do that full time. And that's when I met the folks at this company at PSP, and we clicked and hit it off very well. But I really came on as an organizational psychologist, kind of in training, if you will, here for the first year, and then was functioning independently for a few years. And all of a sudden, the company had to change. Yeah. And because the company had to change, we had to change too. And what I mean by that is the company had to transfer from being a nonprofit organization into a for-profit organization because we were in jeopardy of losing our 501c3 status. That may get a little bit into the weeds, but basically we had not done enough pro bono work to maintain our 501c3 status, and that was a crisis point for the organization. What would we do? So we talked with our board of directors about it, which were some of the titans of industry here in the country, and they said, well, you have a number of options. There's 4 different options. One option you have is to buy the company. And so we were in a position to do that. 4 of us decided to do that. That was not our original plan. We thought we'd be employees for the rest of our lives of this great company. But we were in a position to take advantage of the ownership opportunity, and so we did. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. Well, and that is powerful, my friend. I mean, one of the things I think that that I'm very, very passionate about is, entrepreneurship by acquisition, or acquisition entrepreneurship. Whatever order you kind of put it in. Can you talk a little bit more about that process, right? And frankly, just the flexibility, even, to have to pivot, right? So we have some business owners, listening, executives, entrepreneurs, and other folks who are employees who, may have a desire to be entrepreneurs at some point, but in the midst of this chaos, if you will, and a really challenging time for the organization, you and some other colleagues kind of through wisdom, I guess, of the advice that you got, were able to pivot, even during that time. So I don't know if you can unpack that a little bit more, for us, but I think folks would be interested in hearing kind of a little bit more of your thought process for, how you just ended up pulling the trigger. I mean, moving from employee to, owner and stuff like that, is not a small leap.
Well, pivot is a good word for it. I'm glad you brought that up. So what I would say is we had an established book of business, so we weren't really out there taking a huge risk.
Okay.
But we hadn't run the show ourselves. Of course, we thought we could run the show ourselves. We had thought that right from the beginning, but we never expected to have the opportunity. But we did have this established business. We had a reason for continuing on. All of us liked working together.
Okay.
We liked the staff who supported us in the organization. We felt some obligation to keep them employed as well. So some of that was maybe a little bit of selfishness, a little bit of altruism, but we really thought that we could make the business go. We're fortunate to kind of stand on the shoulders of some giants who had been in this organization in the past. We wanted to keep that going. We felt that the mission that we had of really building competitive companies was a viable mission for the future, something that we could see had some legs to it for the long run. So we didn't feel like we were taking a huge risk in doing it. Although we had to put up our homes for collateral, it was not
a small risk.
It was not a small risk, but it was a worthwhile one in that regard. Yeah.
Okay. And literally, as we're recording this, welcome back, Sophia. You are back from the park. That is awesome, and that is one of the organic things that we love about our pod here, folks. You will not. We always keep it organic. That is fantastic. My daughter Sophia, who is freshly back from the park. It is a beautiful fall day here in the greater Boston area where we live. And so she went out to the park and was swinging and some other things, and just got back. She has her nice little fall boots on. I will not put her on camera right now, but she looks very cute. And we are going to eat lunch together in a little bit. So excited, to continue, Gary, and hearing about that. I mean, you mentioned it wasn't as much of a risk, and I guess I'll translate that, I guess, for people a little bit, where you mentioned the existing clientele and client partners that you kind of had, and so it was an existing book of business, which is great. As I mentioned, I mean, collateralizing your house is not for the faint of heart, and we are not advising anyone necessarily to do that. But I think that just kudos go to you and your partners for not only kind of having the vision, but frankly even just asking your board and others for advice in the midst of that. And I think that that's a major key for anyone who's listening to this, is just in times of uncertainty, right? And there's nothing wrong with finding experts, or people that you trust, people who care about you, kind of have a vested interest in you, who can give you advice. And I love the way that you said that there were 4 options, right? So to be able to kind of consider, multiple options, but then, make a choice as far as the direction that you were going to move in. It's interesting. I think I said, I don't know if I've ever said this on an episode, but I will repeat it. I find that, at least in my own life, and I think through this from the perspective of alignment, right? And when I am in alignment, on something from a dream or a vision perspective, I can take one step forward and and 1,000 things will happen, right? And if I'm in misalignment, I can take 1,000 steps and nothing will happen. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about that and some of like how maybe you've seen something similar, like, kind of manifest itself in your life, and maybe even just keeping it, with the story of, this organization that you built, and how, once you all took that step, what are the things that began to, happen as a result of you taking over the company and shifting it from a 501c3 to a for-profit entity?
So obviously we had to focus on continuing to generate income for the company, to continuing to do what was bringing in the dollars, so to speak, while starting to do more of the things that we liked to do. Okay. One thing I would say to anybody listening is if you're going to try to take a business in a different direction, you have to think about a couple things. You have to think about what you're good at. And so we were good at certain things. Some of those things had been kind of unused or maybe on the shelf at PSP Metrics before we were able to take over the company. So we were able to start doing some things that we were good at. Okay. And one of the things we were good at was making products, innovating things, coming up with new tools of various kinds. And what we learned along the way is just because you build it, it doesn't mean they will come. and so we had to learn somewhat the hard way to listen to our customers and what they needed and what they wanted rather than what we wanted to do. And so I would just say to anybody else who's thinking about pivoting a business, yes, you do need to think about what you're good at, but you also need to think about what the market needs.
That's huge. Yeah. Just to repeat that for everybody. So not just thinking about what you're good at, what your core competency, of your business, of what your business currently is, but also the market needs. So what are your clients telling you that they need? And frankly, I mean, maybe some of that, Gary, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is also anticipating like where the market is going based on feedback from your clients as well.
Well, that's right. And that feedback component you just mentioned is key, because if you're just trying to think about where the market is going on your own, you're going to be mistaken much of the time. And our graveyard, so to speak, at PSP Metrics is littered with 3 or 4 different products that we invested heavily in developing because we really liked them. We thought they're really good. We thought the market would want them, but the market, we didn't really consult the market beforehand. We were psychologists, not marketing people, and so live and learn in those kind of ways.
Yeah, and that's so strong, especially in a time like we live in now. I mean, when you think about the internet and the fact that whether through social media or anything else, I've heard multiple people say that when you have a concept, right, even a podcast or something else, the instantaneous feedback, right, from people that you can get. Folks will listen or they won't, right? Folks will buy your product or they won't. And I think that it's such an interesting cycle, that businesses and entrepreneurs and others find. And so definitely encourage folks that, take that advice from Dr. Williamson as you're thinking about, clients, getting that feedback specifically from people who you believe are going to buy or have the power to influence buying of whatever your product is. I think that's really, really powerful. So the kind of tagline of our pod is, of being able to drive change through people, or driving change through people, right, Gary? And you mentioned, actually, as you guys were taking over, some of the responsibility you even felt for, the current team and individuals who supported you all. Can you talk through, just the importance of, having a strong team, and once again, kind of in taking that step from individual contributor kind of into a leadership role, the power of being able to, maybe cast a vision, but then also once again to be able to drive that change through the people and